All right, well, good morning. Thank you all so very much for being here today at the 2025 Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance annual meeting. I'm Scott Novisnik. I serve as the coordinator of the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance, and I am truly thrilled that all of you are able to make it today to our annual meeting, those of you here in person, as well as those of you who are joining us on Zoom today. And you're all here today to help us to work towards our mission of collaborating to conserve Indiana's rare plants and their natural habitats. Our meeting today is being recorded so that those who weren't able to make it today are able to go back and see what we talked about. And so that those of us who are here today, if there's something we want to go back and see in the recording, we can go back and review what we discussed. For those of you who are here in person, as I mentioned earlier, the restrooms are right out that back door, down the hall, and on your right. And we have water, coffee, and snacks that will be available all day over here on the side of the room. For those who are attending virtually, Alyssa Morley is going to be monitoring the Zoom chat today for any questions or comments that you have that would like to relate to our group. Thank you, Alyssa, for doing that for us today. And also, if you're on Zoom, please be sure to mute your microphones. As an alliance, we strive to be as welcoming and as inclusive as possible. And I hope that all of you who are here today or with us on Zoom will feel comfortable engaging and participating in discussions by asking any questions that you have and providing feedback. Today's meeting would not be possible without the generous support from our four sponsors: Central Indiana Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy, the Indiana Land Protection Alliance, and Franklin College. Would anyone who's here today from those organizations please stand or wave to be recognized by the group? So in addition to our meeting sponsors, there are a number of individuals and organizations without whom this annual meeting of the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance would not be possible. Our meeting planning committee, which includes Elisa Nyberg, Alice Heikens, and Beth Stillebauer, is truly the reason that we are all here today. They've done all the work in organizing this meeting, as well as the staff at Franklin College. And the staff at Franklin College that I want to recognize are Tyler Isaac from the Office of Information Technology back in the room, as well as Tasha Smothers and Eva Duncan from the Parkhurst Dining Services. They're responsible for all of our food and drink today. Chase Bowden and Everett Barrow from the Physical Facilities, who set up all the chairs and the stage, the tables for us. And then there are three students or former students from Franklin College, Abby, Sky, and Lou, who are here to help out as much as possible today as well. So with those folks, please rise or wave these recognize. I would also like to thank the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which is headed up by Lisa Nyberg. Our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is going to be taking us off shortly with an activity. And they do a fabulous job of providing our opportunities to as wide an audience as possible and to help everyone feel welcome. With all the members of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, please stand or wave to be recognized. We wouldn't really have much of a meeting today without all of our presenters and our species conservation teams who are out in the field with the word who are here today to talk to us and to share their knowledge. Would all today's presenters and anyone who is on one of our rare species conservation teams, whether you're a team leader or just a member of that team, would stand for the The Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance is kept running by individuals that we call our organizational team. This group meets throughout the year to keep us on track and to plan events or to help plan events such as this. If you're on our organizational committee, again, please stand or wave to recognize. And lastly, all of us, everyone here today, we are the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance. Every one of you here today makes this alliance a successful, warm, and community building organization. As I run through these introductory slides, I'm supposed to be advancing. As I run through these introductory slides, you are going to see over on the sides of the slides representation of all of the organizations who have signed on as partners of the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance. And there are just so many of them. It's really exciting to see that group of organizations. But if you don't see your organization recognized and would like to, please let me know. As Indiana State Botanist, I don't think that I can be successful in my position without a dedicated group of people like all of you who help make my job easier with your work through the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance. So I personally would like to thank everyone here today. One of the questions that inevitably is asked of me after attendees come to this annual meeting of the Plant Conservation Alliance is, how can I personally get involved? My hope is that over the course of today's meeting, you can see how other individuals throughout the state are making a difference in the conservation of rare plants, and that this is going to lead you to see what your path might be with the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance. If you have the ability to be a part of a committee, please take a look at our webpage and contact one of those committee chairs and see what you can do to help out there. If you have the ability to do field work, we have 10 active rare plant conservation teams who are working around the state on rare plant conservation. You can see the different regions, the 7 regions that those 10 teams are working within up on the screen here. And so pretty much no matter where you live in Indiana, you're within a couple of hours of where there is rare plant conservation work going on as part of the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance. Please feel free to reach out to one of these species conservation team leaders if there's something that interests you there. Or maybe you want to consider starting a new rare plant conservation team. After last year's meeting, in fact, 2 of our attendees were driving home and they were talking about starting the Plant Conservation Alliance species conservation team. And so now today we have one more team than we did last year working on Baxter's violet and conservation of that species. I urge all of you to think creatively. If you have a skill that you think our alliance would benefit from, please let me know. I have a reputation of not being able to say no to things. So if you have a good idea, there's a really good chance I'm going to take you up on your idea and implement that within a conservation alliance. So what can you expect from today's meeting? We are going to be updated by representatives from each of our rare species conservation teams on the work that their teams have been up to over the past year. And this year, there are a lot of positive stories and some great success stories and some good news that they're going to share with us. That includes a couple of newly discovered populations of some of our target species. It includes the rediscovery of a population of one of our target species that hadn't been seen since 2007. And it includes positive responses to habitat management that's being done to improve conditions for another of our target species. We're going to hear from an expert in the field of seed banking about why seed banking is such an important part of rare plant conservation. We'll hear from someone about the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance Rare Plant Reintroduction Guidelines and why those are so important for our teams to follow as they work through conservation efforts for these rare species. We're going to hear also about how citizen science can be used to protect Indiana's rare plants. And this is another way that many of you can get involved at some point in the future through rare plant monitoring efforts. And then lastly, at today's meeting, you can expect plenty of networking opportunities. Take the time that's available during those opportunities to introduce yourself to someone new and to reconnect with old acquaintances. I'm not going to go through today's agenda, but it can be seen by either scanning the QR code that's up on the screen here or the one that's on your tables, on a sheet of paper that's in the middle of your tables. Of note, I want to point out we do have a 15-minute break at 11 o'clock. We have an hour and 15 minutes for lunch at 12:15, and then we have a networking and happy hour from 2:40 to 3:30. I do encourage everyone to stick around, though, until 3:30 when we formally wrap up after reconvening. And that will also give you a chance to take our survey to let us know how we do today. So let's get started. I would like to invite our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee team members up to the stage to get us kicked off. So thanks a lot. I hope you enjoy the day.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Huntington, and I'm a member of the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Welcome. We're so excited to be here with you, fostering an inclusive and equitable approach to plant conservation. Together, we can ensure that our work reflects and benefits diverse communities while protecting Indiana's native plants and natural habitats. Thank you for being a part of this important effort and sharing in this moment with us. We'll be covering a few slides with you, followed by an invitation to join us in a special activity. But first, we'd like to begin by introducing members of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, several of whom are joining in person and several online. If you are here in person, please smile and wave. And if you're joining online, please come on camera and also wave. In person today, we have Mike Everidge, Lydia Miramontes Lloyd, Elisa Nyberg, and joining us online, we have Brooke Alford, Alyssa Morley, Mariah Russell, and Betsy Yankowiak. Our mission is to build an Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance in which all members have an equal voice in the conversations, no matter their ability, age, background, color of their skin, experience, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Our role is to foster a space in which everyone feels they belong and their opinions and actions are valued. Diversity is so important for ecological health. We celebrate diversity in ecosystems. Let us begin to fully recognize the diversity that is always around us. Let's increase our comfort with all kinds of diversity so that we can embrace it and make it a comfortable space to exist in. All right, we made it to activity time. Everybody feeling ready? All right. So, in this section, we're going to utilize those Post-it notes and pens and markers on the table. And if you're coming online with us today, then we're going to use the chat function. So, for our group work today, we're going to focus on the diversity that's all around us. We're going to reflect on the places and spaces where we see it and have experienced it in our everyday life. So to get our minds worked up and thinking, let's do a few thinking exercises here. Ready? So let's first envision the most floristically diverse area you've ever been in. What did it look like? What did it sound like? What did it smell like and feel like? How about the most people diverse place you've ever been? Same questions. What did it look like and feel like? What did it smell like? What did it sound like? How about a meal in which there were a variety of foods and spices and drinks? What was that like? And then as we look around this room that we're in today, there's so much diversity here in this space, right? The colors in the clothing that we wear, the textures of that clothing, the shoes that got us to this meeting today. We're surrounded by diversity always, and it's an important part of our natural world and in our daily lives too, isn't it? So, feeling ready? For those of us who are in person, we'd love for you to grab a Post-it note or more than one and write down at least one example of diversity that you experience in your own life. Use as many Post-it notes as you need. And for those of us that are joining online, feel free to type in your examples into the chat. Or if you prefer, you can go ahead and send all of your examples to Elizabeth Morley and then she can post them under her name if you like a little bit more. So we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Any questions about your charge here? Feel good? You all are working so hard. See the heads down. I do see a few people have leaned back, so I'll offer. Would anyone like to share an example or two that they thought of? Yeah, right ahead. Beautiful example. Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Anything that they came up with? Oh, thank you. For those that are calling online, we had an example of a book club and the diversity of books that are recommended and read. Yes. Huh?
So we actually a lot of maybe like to go them out. But maybe like I'm there to do different sizes, different textures, walk flat, and some are walking to I like stuff.
Beautiful example. That was an example eloquently said about the diversity of native plant seeds. Thank you. One more for the group before we wind down. Yes, thank you.
On now, I was in Amazon and improving the Amazon cascaders, so moving towards the has, everything there. So the place that we were staying at, people that were visiting, a lot of different different places around the world. That I've ever seen here.
Yeah, another excellent example. So not only the diversity of the Amazon rainforest, but also the diversity of people that were there in that moment experiencing it together. Great. Awesome. Well done, everyone. We'll quickly give yourself a round of applause for just writing things down and sharing things out. Great. So as we wrap up here, what's going to happen next is that Lydia is going to be working hard to capture all the ideas that we have written on our Post-it notes, and she's going to put them online for the online community to read. In addition, they're also going to be capturing all the online ideas and putting them on Post-it notes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the Post-it notes all around the room today so that we can read them over the course of the day, during breaks, if you just need a refresh. Because ultimately, we really want to remind ourselves that we are always surrounded by diversity, and it's an important part of our Indian Plant Conservation Alliance. It's an important part of our world and our lives. We really want to recognize it and just celebrate it. So thank you all so much for doing that activity. If at any point you want to reach out to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, you can start with me, and I can get you in touch with the person that maybe can answer your questions or best take your suggestion. My name is listed there, my email, and then my phone number. Texting is best. We live in rural Indiana. Also, or if you'd like to join our committee, please do. We meet once a month for an hour at a time that works well for everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you, Elisa and Andrea and the entire Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Really important, there's coffee again if anybody needs to refill. So we're going to move on to our first speaker, Jeremie Fant. Jeremie has been a conservation scientist at the Chicago Botanic Garden for over 20 years. His research interests are in the preservation of the genetic diversity of rare species. Although he is historically focused on looking at diversity in situ and in restorations, in recent years, Jeremie has been increasingly looking at diversity in ex situ collections, from seed banks to living collections. He is working with the Garden's National Tallgrass Prairie Seed Bank to conserve the region's biodiversity and to help it serve the regional restoration community. Jeremie is going to be presenting on why seed banking should be a component of rare species conservation. Please join me in welcoming Jeremie Fant.
Okay, thank you everyone. As Scott mentioned, I'm here to talk about seed banking. This talk was originally going to be done tag team with Jeff Carson with USDA, but he couldn't make it. So I am going to talk about seed banking in Chicago Botanic Garden, but I'm also going to talk on the national scale as well. All seed banks are kind of interconnected, so hopefully it comes across all things that we do. Seed banking has been going on for a while now. The history of seed banking goes long back, especially if you're in agricultural crops. But the seed banking of native species is relatively new, but still we're in the 20 to 25 years of doing this sort of thing. And so the reasons for seed banking and why we seed bank and the seed banks that we do have has changed, and the reasons we're doing it has changed. And so I'm going to run through my talk, and I'm going to talk a bit about the evolution of our seed bank, how it works, what it does, how it integrates internationally. And then from there, talk about how we're starting to change the way we see seed banks, which hopefully becomes more relevant to many people in the room as far as rare species conservation. I should start by saying that I am representing a seed bank group at the Gardens. So I am the Director of Conservation. I help oversee the ex situ conservation of the Gardens and conservation of genetic diversity. Becky Barak is our seed bank curator. She studies seed traits and the importance of seed traits in restoration. Dave Tolberger is the person on the ground who does most of the heavy lifting. He's a genius. He knows everything. If there's a plant that needs to be ID'd, he's the person to go to. He has cleaned 1,500 taxa. He knows how to do all of them. If you have any questions about seed cleaning, seed viability, anything else, I would go to him first rather than me. He knows everything. Sarah Hollis is a master student in a program. We're trying to train our master students in seed banking, and so she is hired as a research assistant, and she has done some of the work done today. And then Chris Woolridge is recently looking at a network of creating a network in the Midwest of seed banking, and so I'm going to talk briefly about that. So, like I said, I'm just a figurehead right now. So to start off with, I just want you to really reflect, and I don't think we plant people appreciate really the magic of seeds. The evolution of seed is really just an amazing thing in itself. The very fact that plants developed a way to put their embryo on stasis and freeze-reason, not do anything until conditions are right, are amazing, right? So a seed is produced, the embryo is there, that embryo just waits for the right time. It can wait a couple of years, it can even wait hundreds of years, it can wait for the right conditions. The idea that you could take an embryo and just let it stay in a stationary position and just wait for the conditions are right are pretty amazing and a pretty good reason why plants are now covering the whole globe. I mean, they can travel anywhere, they can do everything. The other thing from my perspective, as I said, I work on conservation of rare species, both living and seed banking. But in that packet, we have 3,000 to 11,000 individuals frozen in a seed bank for 100 to 200 years, right? So in one little soil envelope, I have the potential to regenerate 10,000 individuals in that small thing. I particularly think about that because I work with the zoo community. You try and do that with a polar bear, right? So that is the population and the full genetic diversity of a single population maintained in 11,000 individuals. You couldn't do that with polar bears. There's no way that the zoo community can even think about saving population level diversity, let alone the species. So we are in an amazing situation as plant people in what we can do and how we can do it. And the seeds give us the opportunity to really conserve the maximum amount of genetic diversity we have of the taxa that we are in charge of looking after. And so I don't know if I have to tell one of these, but if you compare us to what animals have to do, we're in a good position. Obviously, there are some species that are worth for, but for a lot of them in the Midwest, that does. To give you a bit of history about seed banking has been around for centuries and centuries. Like people have always stored seeds. That's how agriculture took off. The fact we could store seeds meant agriculture could survive past feast and famine. But seed banking in the conventional and modern sense happened in the 1950s a lot with agricultural crops when we lost wild cultivars. But it wasn't until the year 2000-ish when the Kew Botanic Gardens recognized that we are not saving native plants or non-useful, whatever that means, plants. And so they started a mission in Britain to collect every plant in Great Britain. So one representative of every species in Great Britain. They did that really quickly because there's not much diversity in Britain. And so they then went global and decided that they're going to raise money to collect 10% of the world's flora. They couldn't do it on their own. They formed partnerships. And in the US, they formed a number of partnerships. We are just one of the many partners they've partnered with. And we at the Chicago Botanic Garden decided that we were concerned about the tall grass prairie in our region, and that really we wanted to try and save as many of the taxa that make up the tall grass prairie. So we focused initially on the tall grass prairie region was our focus, and being able to restore that community that is so precious in our part of the world. Right? I would say on that we have collectors that do the whole region. We have very few collectors in Indiana. We have very few collections from Indiana. So if anyone is interested in partnering with us to help us save the tall grass prairie species and the genetic representation of Indiana, we would love to talk to you about that. Volunteers send us seeds. Initially, we had to narrow the target down. There's like 3,000 species that we could be collecting throughout this region. So we focused on those important in restoring the communities, initially at least, the communities or species needed to reconstruct the prairie or woodlands or wetlands in the tall grass prairie region. So even though we've got tall grass prairie in our name, it's really the region that we're interested in, not just the prairie itself. So this, I should mention, this partnership also included a partnership nationally. In 2008, the Seeds of Success program was started. That program is a national program run by federal agencies to try and collect all the species of North America and have them seed bank at Washington, Pullman, Washington, and USDA and Green. This is where Jeff Carlson from the USDA, who manages some of the collections that occur throughout the country. Most of the seed that's collected really focused on the western United States with fire restoration, so they're collecting many of the species needed to put back out after fire. In Iowa, Jeff's work is looking at taking many of the species that they do and growing them out and helping bulking those out. In addition, all the seed we collect, we send to SOS. So anything we collect, we give half of them to them, so we have a backup, and so it's in the national collection. And then that's where Jeff gets many of our collections from. He will get it through us and other partners. So currently, the tall grass prairie seed bank at the gardens has roughly 5,000 accessions, 1,800 taxa, millions of seeds there, and we keep growing and we keep trying to get more and more. It has been 20 years since we started, and we now realize that maybe we need to do a frame shift, and I think this is where I'd be curious anyone's opinions on and anything else they've got on ideas of ways seed banks could be useful. One thing we've realized is people seeing seed banks as a place where you deposit seeds to die. Like no one thinks of it as a place where seeds come in and come out again. And so we're trying to remind people that this is a resource. It's not a place for seeds to die. It's something that should be a living bank which allows plants to be used and utilized in different sort of ways. So just as sort of a backup for those who don't know, this is how seed is historically being collected with the idea of maximizing genetic diversity. I will recognize right away that this is not very useful for rare plants, and I'll get to that in a minute. So one of the reasons that many rare species currently aren't being seed banked is the requirement to get maximum diversity requires a population larger than 50 flowering individuals. We need to collect from the whole population. We need to collect somewhere between 10 to 20% of those seeds. Of those, we're hoping to get a minimum of 3,000 seeds for a new collection. These guidelines maximize genetic diversity. They also minimize impact to the population. And so when done right, we can do a really good job of capturing the genetic diversity of a large population. Now, this is obviously not possible with rare species, and I'll get to some modifications of it to accommodate those. For those who are interested, like I said, Dave has cleaned and processed seed from so many tractors through the Midwest. If anyone ever has any questions, I would recommend reaching out to Dave. He's done an amazing job with INPCA. So all the seed we get sent to us. We drive them down. All the data is entered into a database, which you can have a look at. The seeds are separated out. We clean them. We also X-ray the seed to look at how big the embryo is. If there is a viable embryo, look how many live seed we do have. We then dry them further. We weigh, count, package, and then we seal them in those foil envelopes throughout the beginning, and then finally they get stored in a -20 freezer for as long as until they're needed. Okay. All the collections are split, so half goes to the program that Jeff at USDA does, half that stays here. We even split ours further. Half is used in a bag called research, which is the idea that it could be used if someone needs it. The other half is for long-term storage to keep research. So we're never going to use down our collection, but we do encourage the use of our collection for research. So the things that we're doing and the way that we're changing, we're 20 years old. We need to verify that our seed is still good and viable. So we're starting to do seed germination trials of everything that's being 20 years or older in our collection. And so we're starting to set up protocols, working out what is best, going through the literature, trying to database everything that works and doesn't, and look and make that information useful. We're also looking at seed viability to test how long seed actually does within the seed bank, see how long things come through. We've also come up with a question which we didn't really think through very well when we started, is ownership. When we get seed, what do we do? Who has a say on how that seed gets used? And that is something that we're open for more discussion. We have told people that the seed will be banked and used, checked for research, viability testing, but now we're getting a lot of calls from the restoration community to use that seed. Is that something that site owners will be okay with? We may have to reach out to people again. But with that going forward, ownership of the seed is something we can discuss, and we're going to discuss more thoroughly with people as far as how they see the seed they give to us being used and what they can see. We're starting to get a survey of the seed banks throughout the nation to see how they do these same questions and look through those sort of things. In this photo, you see that Sarah Hollis, our intern, has started to do some seed germination trials. Here she germinated some seed of Asclepias medii. This was in the seed bank collected by Marlon Bowles in the 90s. We got 100% germination rate from this old seed. So we are growing this out. We're testing seed viability. We don't want to throw plants out, especially something like needs milkweed. So we just planted it in a sandbox for potentially creating more seed that can go back in the seed bank. So at this stage, if we grow something out and it's useful, we will grow it out with the idea of returning it back to the seed bank, so re-bulking up our seed bank collection. We're also looking at things like lawn alternatives, using natives instead of some of the other grasses for lawns. We're also looking at container gardens in the urban structure. What can we grow and everything? So there are plans to use these plants rather than just let them go to waste after our viability. Okay, so this is where I started to get the idea of like how you can see the seed bank as part of your community, and this is something that Jeff at USDA is also would project. So here we have a circle. If you ignore the seed bank, that circle represents what we consider the bulking up of native plant material, particularly very common in the West. So what they do is the seed collection is made, it's evaluated, developed, it goes into the field, they produce more seed, the seed is collected, the seed is then stored, and then it goes back out for restoration. So we're at a stage where restoration is very, very common. Seed is becoming a limited factor in getting seed out into production. And so there is a system in place using federal agencies and growers that are trying to bulk up seed with the idea of getting that material back out into the landscape. We're arguing, and federal government historically agreed with us, that seed banking should be an important part of that, right? So if we think about it, seed banking could be a great way, and is a great way, to hold seed in the interim until you need it. You never know with fire ecology when you're going to need seed, so we're going to have to bank it anyway. So even short-term storage, seed banks are useful, but more from other perspectives, right? So I would argue that having a seed bank gives you not only a backup, but it also gives you a baseline, right? So climate change is happening. We're doing a lot of management practices, which can be sometimes risky, especially when dealing with invasives. Sometimes we're not doing things because we're scared to hurt a population, but if you have your seed banks, if something goes wrong, you have a backup, right? So maybe taking more risky management practices to get outcomes might become more useful or easier if you have a backup somewhere else that you can grow. Seed bank for research and measuring change. Seed banks for use for study, for research, getting out to researchers and other people that can give you the valuable information. There are many ways that seed can be useful. Seed is very often the limiting factor for many researchers for restorations and every other factor. So if we had the seed, it could be change the game for many people and make more information more easily available. A recent report, federal report that Kate Higgins, my boss, was involved in, and others at the national level, we're trying to work out what is limiting the availability of seed, native seed into restorations, particularly out west, but generally around the nation. I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to anyone that the outcome of the issue was that although there is a lot more native seed being available out there, there's not the diversity of species available for people who are doing restoration. Getting access to seed that they need or the diversity of seed that they need is not happening. And often what happens out west is if they can't get you that species, they will just substitute it for a cultivar or even a non-native in many situations. So if they need to get seed on the ground, if they can't get native seed, they will substitute it. And so identifying the big issues, making seed available, getting seed out there has been an issue. We think at the seed bank that we're now in a situation where we have many of the taxa that people want. We could work in that circle to try and help that seed become available for conservation. We're not going to compete with nurseries and farmers, but we can bulk up seed at some level, work with growers to get access to seed that they need to put the diversity back into collection. Another thing I talked about through Chris Woolridge, the thing that seed banks are trying to do is they're trying to get together. The idea being that there are many parts of the country already that have what's called seed networks. These are nurseries, growers, seed bankers who are working together to try and make more native seed available. The Midwest currently doesn't have a singular source, but we are trying to work with the Fish and Wildlife Service and all the seed bank partners around the state to try and start making a network where all the growers and people doing the land management start have a network where they can get access to the species they want to get on the ground, that sort of thing. So, and seed banks are going to be central to this, right? We are the ones that got the seed, we collected it, we got it there, we bought it at the right time. So hopefully we can do something. All right, so how does that inform people who do work with rare plants? The biggest issue with rare plants is you can never get enough seed. Seed is always a limiting factor. Seed is precious in rare plants. It's not going to be easy. If you're not aware, there's the Center for Plant Conservation. They have a great booklet called Conservation Practices. It's a free PDF online if you want to Google it. The Center for Plant Conservation has come up with protocols on how to seed bank, grow, propagate, monitor, and do all the things we need to do with rare plants. And so in this, there are the protocols available that can have minimum impact. We know how to do it. We know how to collect seed. And I'm willing to talk to anyone who is willing or wants to put their seed, bank it, save it, just in case situations. We can get more rare species in seed banks so they're safeguarded, so they're ready for restoration, so they're ready for working with in nurseries and that sort of thing. So I put this up there. This is not my guidelines. These are the guidelines of CPC. Free to anyone. You can have a look at the guidelines that we would follow with rare plants. This is the goal of CPC, collecting to do no harm to the rare plants, capture the representative of the genetic diversity. Where possible, if you're working with a particular taxa, you want to capture 5 species and document the collection correctly. And so they then have the whole situation of everything from just collecting to outplanting and everything else that you can use. I put it up there, the number of seed bank sessions we have with some of the taxa that you're working with. As you can see, we have hardly any of your taxa. In seed collections, we have a few of them, but not many. This is the problem if we want to do restorations, if we want to get rare species back in the ecosystem, if we even want to get vulnerable species. Unfortunately, most vulnerable species, or those that are just not that common, but just common enough. I'm not showing them seed banks because they don't fit protocols on how to collect it. So the seed bank is moving to try and work with CPC to come up with protocols that get those rare taxa back into collections. So we have a plants concern program, which we talk about monitoring plants, monitoring their populations, monitoring when seed is viable and ready to collect, what it can support when we have good years. We can then go in during good years, collect that seed, collect it by maternal lines, make sure it's banked, and make sure that it's available for people to do restoration research in the future. And there are great best practices to minimize impacts. So this is where we're moving. We're trying to save some of the rarer habitats in our area too. Dolomite prairies, ravines are very unique to the northeastern Illinois where we're at. So we're trying to collect all the taxa that would make up that habitat so that people can do more restoration, plantings, augmentations with the same seeds. And with that, I will be with the diversity of X-rayed seeds. Someone mentioned seed diversity is amazing, and I agree 100%. Maybe some X-rayed seeds that we have, you can see the diversity of seeds. Yeah, that's not. But if anyone has any questions about seed banking, if they want to develop a seed bank, get some advice about seed bank, or even interested in backing up what they're working on in collections, we would love to talk to you. But I think it's a good thing to do, and hopefully I convinced you that it's valuable, and the genetic diversity you can capture is amazing if you really think about it, but it should be, I would argue, the first step. Well, first step is monitoring, second step is capturing the diversity of that population. I don't have questions now. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Definitely. Yes. Yes, that's a great point. Like, so getting permission to collect rare seed, getting the permits to collect rare seed, and also getting permission from land managers, permitting for all that. No one wants to give you an open thing to collect whatever and whatever. So it is onerous and all to do that. But one thing we've decided is we might start working with Nature Conservancy's groups who collect their seed anyway and ask them if they would allow us to hold the seed even though they continue to own the seed. So that ownership question becomes important. So working with land managers to say, you're doing the work, we're just saying 10,000 seeds, a little packet of seeds. But yeah, the permitting is critical, but I think it's working with land managers or groups like this. We can talk about ownership, we can make sure that everyone gets what they want, we meet permitting requirements. Yeah, right. Yeah, so National Park Service and Cook County Forest Preserve have a very strict ownership that no seed collected from their site can go to anyone except themselves. Even we can't technically use it, Frank. So there are certain groups, national parks and Cook County Forest Preserve that we work with that have very, very strict ownership rules. Other organizations don't care. It's like, yeah, do what you want, and we've got plenty of that, it's fine. So it's the gamut. The only thing we don't do is commercialization. Although we do have a problem with restorations, we don't know at what point that. If we give it to a nursery to grow, to give to a restoration, if money is involved at all, is that commercialization? But we have to deal with that question. Yeah. No, that is a good question. So we recently grew out mead milkweed and lakeside daisy, which are both federally listed, and so we reached out to Fish and Wildlife Service to clarify what their understanding of our ownership of that and what we're allowed to not to do. These are federally listed, we needed federal permits, we had federal permits when we collected them. As far as they were concerned, the federal, in this situation, they were like, we get to use the seed, you can do what you want with it, as long as it's not commercial. So but we do reach out. In any of those gray areas, we do reach out and we try to clarify this. Where possible. That's what I mean, the ownership thing is really, we didn't realize how sticky it is.
So I have a question about how to take the word that you're going to do that. So taxi pilot,
So when we collect the seed, obviously we collect from plants that we've confirmed are the right types as best we can. Is that seed hybrid seed when we get it? We don't know. And so we use the taxonomists and people around to tell us what to expect. I have a separate project. We're looking at collections in general and how often hybrids are showing up in collections, because many collections of juglans, oaks, and everything are done by seed. How often are we accidentally saving a hybrid instead of a thing? It's not as common as it could be with oaks, so that's good. And usually the people on the ground, I mean, like the Dave Sommerbergers of the world, you know, they know when they see something growing, it's like, that looks weird, I'm not to grow that one out. So we rely on experts. Of course, it's good.
Yeah, two comments on that. First, hybrids sometimes are actually important. So if you identify hybrids, you don't just throw them out, you keep them. From an evolutionary standpoint, the hybrids are.
We make no judgment on what to. If it was given to us and we grow it out and it's grown and we put it back, we don't. We try to gather as much information as we can so that people who need the seed know what they're getting, but we do not kill seeds or kill plants at any point.
Yeah, the other question was about growing things out and replenishing your seed bank. How do you have protocols for that so you're not maybe increasing the number of self-seed as you go from generation to generation? Like if we plant out a bunch of Mead's milkweed, for instance, and you're trying to get seeds from those, I mean, how many of those or other species end up being sort of self versus outcross?
Okay, I'll answer that in two parts. First, our protocol is we only grow one species. To prevent hybridization, we'll grow a large bed of a single taxa. We don't do any hand pollination. We just let the natural as best we can. So we can get more self in for sure. But usually the idea is to have even more seeds. So if we started with 200, we're hoping to get 10,000 or something. So I think it's going to be a problem, but at least we have a lot more seeds. So yeah, there's no guarantee what we're going to get. And we do mark it as G1 so that people recognize that it was grown in a nursery, and then what comes with selection and everything else is going to happen, and you can use it as they see fit. The milkweeds are interesting. I work with Woolies milkweed, which has rarely set a pod in the state of Illinois in 25 years. I think we've had 2 pods recorded. We think we know the problem is many populations consist of only a few individuals, and self-incompatibility is a problem. So we are growing Mead's milkweed is another one, but we're growing with the Asclepias, which don't set seed or are from very small populations. We are getting two local provinces together, and we're going to create G1, which we expect probably will be a cross between 2 populations to improve the genetic diversity, seed set, number of seed pods we get, and minimize inbreeding. With the caveat that anyone wants to use it knows that it is local provincing, but it's probably with Woolies milkweed, there's no way we're going to get the pods any other way. But some of the others, it's up to them. But we are trying to bulk Asclepias. There's many that occur in very, very small numbers. There's never many pods, populations of time. So that is an example of where we're actually trying to grow 2 of the same species from the same area together at the same time to increase our seed collections. Yeah. So.
So looking at the Polycanian Italia, that you have 6 collections of in your seed bank. When you showed the map that showed the region you're working with in Indiana, there's a couple little peninsulas into it. Is there a concern about using genetic material from Missouri in that example in Indiana, or have you looked at the geographic range that you're covering in enough detail to feel like we're okay to use seed from Missouri in Indiana?
That's going to be put my neck out on that one. So first thing, the peninsula thing, we've modified that. That was just the original. We've realized that Michigan is getting left off seed banks and Indiana is getting left off seed banks because they're not in the east, not considered the east border. So we're expanding that to Indiana and Michigan. But mixing seed and origin, we try to just maintain the seed and bulk it up to make sure it's available with all the information we can and leave it to people to decide what they're comfortable with. We will not mix, like the milkweeds are all from the state of Illinois, close by, so we feel that that might be amenable to many people. I do think with milkweeds, getting 5 or 6 populations from a 50-kilometer area and mixing them is probably a good idea for many speakers. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, with rare plants, I think outbreeding depression is something that's a problem with adaptation diverged, like 2 different things adapted to do different habitats. Rare plants don't have the luxury to locally adapt as easily as something that's common. Darwin's principle of local adaptation requires that you produce more offspring than the population can support for adaptation to happen. And so there's been a number of meta-analyses that have shown in rare plants, local adaptation isn't as common as common species. And it's because rare plants are struggling to just persist, let alone adapt. They're rarely producing enough individuals. And there's inbreeding and everything else. So I'm more worried about inbreeding than I am about outbreeding in rare species. It's a bias of mine, put it out there. So I'm more concerned with that. And so yeah, I'm more the milkweed, the only pods we can get, one was from northern Illinois, one was from northern Wisconsin. That's the only pods we could find and say that's the best we can do. So but yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy, there's an online question. I saw the Fantech native plant nursery located in Walkerton near South Bend, Indiana, listed on the map, yellow circle, private sector. Are there potential ways for private nurseries to get involved in the Midwest network you're trying to?
Yes, I think Andrea and Chris have reached out to Fantech and others. They definitely talked to many of these people, and Fish and Wildlife Services running it. But yes, absolutely, we do want private partners. We only can collect 10,000 seeds. That is not enough for a restoration of a common species. We do need native nurseries to bulk it up. The only thing we don't want to do is commercialization. If a state land wants to do a restoration, is willing to pay a nursery to grow it up, and that nursery is fine, yeah, we'll work for that. The commercialization is still a great area. Some people don't care though. I mean, we have some land managers here who work on it. The ownership thing comes up again with private company.
Could you define for those that don't know, because I think this is one of the most important topics when we talk about introduction is define a little more with inbreeding and outbreeding depression, what that means and what that means to conservation and seed collection.
You're talking to a genetics nerd, so a little bit careful there, but so in short, inbreeding is usually a problem of a lack of diversity where it becomes too small and too much homozygosity and therefore mutations that are deleterious show up. So it's a decline in fitness, and it's usually associated also with a lack of genetic diversity. So they often go together. They're independent things. So inbreeding is usually a fitness decline. I think one issue that I find with people inbreeding, often they think of mutations or things not surviving at all, things are dying. I think you'll find that inbreeding is even just less vigorous, less flowers, less everything. So it's just a slow vortex of decline because you produce less and less flowers each year, and your offspring produce less and less flowers each year. So we've seen that with Cercia pitchera. So we definitely found in the north they produce hundreds of flowers, in the south they produce a couple, and so it's almost like that. Outbreeding is an interesting phenomenon. It's where the diversity, where things are adapted to very different things, and so when you cross them, the individuals that are producing that crops are adapted to everything from one parent to the other parent and everything in between, and sometimes in between doesn't match what you have or doesn't match what you want. And so it's a problem of too much diversity, and it's just spread across all your offspring, potentially could be a problem. I would argue as a geneticist that natural selection will sort that shit out, right? It's like, I'll take what I want and I'll throw away what I don't want. And if you can have good land management and weights, it will sort itself out, in my opinion, right? So outbreeding is a problem with too much diversity. A lot of individuals are going to die because they're not adapted. But let natural selection decide the problem, is my opinion. Let it decide what's good and what's bad. My opinion, many people disagree with that one, so just take that for what it's worth. Thanks. Did that answer give the background? Well, thank you. And if anyone wants to talk seed banking, I'll be here all day. So.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks for taking so many questions as well at the end of your presentation. That's great. We have a break now at 11 o'clock and we'll meet back here at 11:15. We'll get started promptly again at 11:15. Thanks. All right, well, good morning. Thank you all so very much for being here.